Hey everybody. I'm Tyree's mom, Lindsay, and
I'm his father, Roger.
so we just wanted to take this opportunity to come on his page and kind of talk about this journey that we have been on. We want to kind of give some of the back history to what caused us to take this journey. So 2 years later.
Autumn Anderson describes what happened next like she's reading you a grocery list. I hopped out to the first one, she says. No shake in her voice, no tears. Just facts, laid out flat, one after another, like she's narrating someone else's life instead of the father of her own child dying in front of her. 20-year-old Tyree Richardson walked into that bedroom expecting his own life. What he found instead ended it. He wasn't a stranger there. This was his house, his girlfriend, his child sleeping down the hall. He had every reason in the world to believe he was safe. But the man in that bed wasn't him. Think about that for a second. Not a break-in, not a stranger with a weapon and no connection to the family. A man Tyree's own girlfriend had let into that bedroom on a night Tyree wasn't supposed to be home at all. He came unannounced. Nobody told him to stay away, and nobody told him to come back either. He just showed up to his own house. Before we go further, hit subscribe now, because what happens in the next 15 minutes will completely change how you see this case. Tyree fell into that room as the bullets kept coming. 16 rounds fired in seconds, one young man, one doorframe, one woman on the bed, watching, describing it later like she was reporting the weather. You've probably seen the comments already, because this clip has been circling online for months. How do you sleep through 16 shots? People can't get past her tone. They can't reconcile the calm in her voice with the violence she's describing. Court records confirm 16 gunshot wounds, but nothing in those records explains her composure. That mismatch, right there, is the entire reason this case refuses to die online.
Stranger breaking in.
Just a shooting.
He was the ex-boyfriend.
It's a shooting
and the shooter, the new man in her bed, one walked in trying to save a relationship.
But everyone seems to notice, because this isn't a story about a stranger breaking in. This is a story about a love triangle that turned fatal and a woman who was in the room for every single part of it, from the very beginning to the very end.
The other walked out a killer,
Tyree
and the woman caught between them. She's never spoken publicly until now.
People actually recognized. A business he was proud enough to put his own face on. A family he was fighting, actively and visibly, to hold together. None of that saved him. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This wasn't the first time someone tried to kill Tyree Richardson. It wasn't even close to the first warning he got that something in his life didn't add up. The last time someone came for him, only 2 people on earth knew exactly where he'd be that night. One of them was the woman he trusted with his son. Ask yourself right now, if you were Tyree, would you have seen this coming, or would love have made you just as blind? Because that's the real question sitting underneath every headline about this case. Not who pulled the trigger, who knew, and when. Understand why that door mattered so much. You have to understand who was walking through it and everything he'd already survived to get there. Tyree Tashin Richardson was born the 26th of April 2002 into a family most people only dream about. His parents, Lindsay and Roger Richardson, had been married 25 years by the time this story ends. 25 years, 4 kids, and a home built on structure and love instead of chaos. Tyree wasn't just their son. Multiple people close to the family describe him as the emotional center of that household. By the age of 20, Tyree had already outworked most adults twice his age. Sit with that for a second, because it matters for everything that comes next. He rapped under the name FSO Gunk, and he wasn't just dabbling. He had real releases, real momentum, and a fan base that showed up. He ran a food truck called Despot 301, with plans to expand it into breakfast, lunch, and dinner service across his community. He bred dogs on the side, running 3 separate income streams before most people his age have finished figuring out one. Here's Promise One delivered. This is the man behind the headline, not just a name in a court file, not just a statistic in a news segment. A 20-year-old who was actively building something right up until the night it all stopped. He met Autumn Anderson in high school, young love, the kind that feels permanent when you're 17 and you haven't been tested by anything yet. They built plans together, talked about a future. On the surface, it looked like exactly the kind of story people root for. Then came the 26th of April, 2020, Tyree's 18th birthday. A night that should have been nothing but celebration. Autumn made it look perfect. An at-home massage arranged in advance, brunch cooked that morning, gifts, dinner out with his entire family, then the club to close out the night. On paper, this is flawless girlfriend behavior. Nothing here should raise a single red flag. But notice what's missing from that entire day. Not one of Tyree's friends showed up. Not one. On a milestone birthday, surrounded by people who supposedly loved him, his own circle was nowhere to be found. His best friend, known as Boog, lived in the same house as Tyree and Autumn. And Boog was gone the entire day, not late, not stopping by briefly. Completely absent. From morning until the moment everything changed that night. When they got home from the club, Autumn was still in the car, talking. Tyree stepped out to smoke near the trunk, completely unaware that anything was wrong. He wasn't heading inside. He wasn't leaving anyone behind. He was just standing there, in what should have been the safest moment of his entire day. Then, in seconds, everything changed. Shadows moved past the car, fast. Then again, just as fast. Gunfire tore through the quiet Crofton neighborhood that night, shattering what had been, up until that exact second, a perfect birthday. Somehow, against every odd, Tyree survived. But think about this for one moment, because it's the detail that should stop you cold. Only 2 people on Earth knew exactly where Tyree would be that night. His girlfriend and one close friend. So how did an armed shooter know precisely where to find him, at precisely the right moment, on a night that had been carefully planned out hours in advance? Tyree grew suspicious. Understandably so. But he let it go anyway because that's what love does to good judgment. It makes you explain away the unexplainable over and over until explaining it away becomes a habit. Investigators never charged anyone in connection with the 2020 Crofton shooting. As of today, it remains officially unsolved. Here's what makes this single detail so important to everything that follows. This wasn't random violence in a dangerous neighborhood. This was personal, calculated, timed down to the minute on the one night Tyree's location was guaranteed and predictable. And it happened almost exactly 2 years, to the week, before the night that finally killed him. Tyree walked away from what should have been recognized immediately as an assassination attempt and went right back into the same relationship, the same house, the same daily risk. He didn't pull away. He didn't investigate further, at least not publicly. He stayed. Why would a driven, successful 20-year-old ignore a warning that direct, that specific, that clearly aimed at him? Because he believed the story he was being told. And the woman telling it was about to become far more entangled in his life, not less through a pregnancy, a shared child, and a relationship that was already quietly cracking apart behind the scenes. Bridge. One survived attempt should have been a warning. Instead, it became a countdown nobody could see running. Here's Promise 2 delivered. You're about to hear exactly how this relationship fell apart, using Tyree's own recorded words as the centerpiece of everything. But first, let's lay out the timeline that got them there, because the order of these events changes everything about how you'll hear that call. Here are 5 facts you need before we go any further. 1. Tyree grew suspicious after the 2020 shooting and started quietly asking questions about who knew his location that night. 2. His suspicion led toward people close to the household, not toward strangers or outsiders. 3. During this exact same period, Autumn was already building a relationship with another man. Terrence Kenneth Yancey, known to everyone as Trey. 4 by 2021, Autumn was pregnant with Tyree's child, a development that should have anchored the relationship in stability. 5, despite every red flag stacking up around him, Tyree tried harder than ever to hold his family together. Sit with fact 3 for a second, because it reframes everything. While Tyree was quietly chasing down who tried to kill him, the answer may have been closer than he could have possibly imagined. Autumn admits this herself. Publicly, the connection with Yancey had been building for months, not weeks, months, running in parallel with a relationship Tyree believed was solid enough to build a family on. Pregnancy should have been the turning point toward real stability. Instead, it exposed everything underneath the surface. Autumn later said she discovered Tyree involved with other women during this period, and her response wasn't to address it directly. Her response was to lean further into her connection with Yancey. 2 people, 2 separate secrets, 1 shared house. Then COVID hit, and it hit hard. Autumn's beauty business shut down completely, almost overnight. She leaned on Tyree for everything that mattered: the roof over her head, the food on the table, the car in the driveway. She remained financially dependent on him while simultaneously continuing her relationship with Yancey, according to her own public account of this period. Now here's the call. March 2022. Tyree recorded pouring his heart out to a woman he still believed he could win back. He begs her to stay. He admits he was absent as a partner, that he smoked too much, that he wasn't showing up the way she needed him to. He tells her, more than once, that he doesn't want to lose his family over mistakes he's willing to name out loud. He apologizes, repeatedly, for things he says weighed the relationship down for years. Listen to how he sounds throughout that call: desperate, cracking under the weight of it, trying literally everything he can think of to fix what's already broken. Now, listen to how she sounds back: flat, measured, distant, in a way that doesn't match the emotional intensity coming from the other end of the line. He tells her he loves her from the bottom of his heart, that he'll keep loving her no matter what happens next. She responds like she's negotiating the terms of a lease agreement, not fighting for a relationship with a child involved. This wasn't a healthy relationship by any reasonable measure. Tyree admits to physical violence just 1 week before this exact call, and that fact matters. And it doesn't cancel out or excuse what happens to him weeks later. Both things are true at once. Because not long after this recording, the man who begged her not to leave would be dead on her bedroom floor. 2 people going in completely opposite emotional directions, at the exact same time, in the exact same relationship, one fighting to rebuild something, one already, emotionally, somewhere else entirely. Do you think Autumn already knew what was coming when this recording was made? Drop your theory below. We're reading every single comment on this one. The call ends with Tyree still hoping, still trying, still convinced, against every piece of evidence stacking up around him, that there's something left worth saving. He had absolutely no idea he was running out of time, or how little of it was actually left. Bridge. Everything you just heard was recorded word for word. Everything that happened next was witnessed under oath by the people in that room. The 13th of June, 2022. This is the night a courtroom would spend 7 full days examining, piece by piece. Autumn, her sister JC Cherry, Yancey, and a friend named Chad spent the evening together at the house. Dinner, a movie. Normal, unremarkable hours that gave no indication of what was coming. At 2:47 a.m., Autumn and Yancey went upstairs together. Less than an hour later, Tyree Richardson walked through that bedroom door. Trial testimony confirms Yancey fired 16 times, striking Richardson, who was unarmed at the time. Yancey fled the scene immediately after the shooting. Police arrested him the following day at a gas station, ending a short manhunt. He was indicted on 11 separate charges, including murder, use of a firearm in the commission of a violent crime, reckless endangerment, and evidence tampering. At trial, Yancey claimed self-defense. He testified that he genuinely believed his life was in danger the moment that bedroom door opened in the dark. The state argued otherwise, forcefully that shooting an unarmed man 16 times went far beyond anything the law recognizes as reasonable self-defense, no matter how frightening that moment might have felt. Here's a detail that rarely makes it into the online retellings of this case. Autumn initially told responding officers a different version of events than what she later testified to in court. According to the appellate record, she first said Richardson just busted in the room, language that shifted once she took the stand months later. Body-worn camera footage capturing her immediate reaction was played for the jury during trial. One officer described her as being in a state of what the record calls hysteria. Whether that composure cracked in the moment and simply hardened by the time she gave interviews years later is something the court left for the jury to weigh, not something we can settle for you here. If a case built on 11 charges, inconsistent early statements, and 7 days of testimony still doesn't feel fully resolved to you, that's exactly why you need to subscribe, because we break down verdicts like this every single week. After 7 days, the jury reached its decision. Yancey was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to 18 years. The court also granted a partial acquittal on one charge, evidence tampering related to concealing the handgun, while the manslaughter conviction stood. Not murder, manslaughter. A meaningful legal distinction that shaped everything about his sentence. Yancey later appealed the conviction, and Maryland's appellate court reviewed the case as recently as 2025, proof that, legally, this story still isn't entirely finished. Here's the detail that changes how most people see this entire case, and we need to be precise about it, because the internet gets this wrong constantly, in ways that genuinely put a real person at risk. Autumn Anderson testified for the prosecution. She was never charged with any crime connected to this case. Not as an accessory, not for withholding information, not for anything. She sat in that courtroom as a witness for the state, not as a defendant facing charges of her own. That single fact reframes everything you just watched unfold. The pregnancy, the recorded call, her relationship with Yancey running underneath it all. None of it, legally, made her responsible for what happened in that bedroom. The law drew a hard, specific line. One man pulled the trigger, and one man alone answered for it in a court of law. But legal responsibility and public suspicion are two entirely different things, and the internet has never fully accepted where that line actually got drawn. Was justice fully served here? Or did the courtroom only ever tell half of this story? Self-defense, or something far more calculated? Tell us your verdict in the comments. We genuinely want to know where you land on this. 18 years for the man who pulled the trigger. 0 charges for the woman in that bed. That gap, right there, is exactly where this case has lived ever since the verdict came down. Bridge. The gavel came down. The comment section never did. Tyree's family never got the version of justice they were hoping for. His parents, Lindsay and Roger, raised him for 20 years, only to bury him after one night they had absolutely no control over. They keep speaking out publicly. They keep his name alive online, refusing to let this story quietly fade into another closed case file. And the internet? The internet split into 2 clear camps almost immediately, and it hasn't reunited since. One side believes Autumn orchestrated every part of this, from the first ambush in Crofton all the way to the night Yancey pulled the trigger. They point to her flat tone in interviews. They point to the timeline lining up too neatly. They point to a motive they believe explains everything. The other side sees a young mother who lost her child's father in front of her own eyes, then got dragged through years of public accusation with 0 legal basis behind any of it. Both sides can't be fully right at the same time. But we owe you the truth over the theory, every single time, no matter which theory happens to be more popular online. So here it is again, stated clearly, because it genuinely matters. Autumn Anderson has never been charged with any crime in connection with Tyree Richardson's death. Not then, not in the years since, not as new attention has cycled back onto this case again and again. Whatever role people online believe she played, the courts never found the evidence to bring a single charge against her. That doesn't mean every question here gets answered, though. It doesn't explain why her friend Boog vanished for an entire birthday celebration. It doesn't explain the 2020 shooting that remains officially unsolved to this day. It doesn't fully explain why her account of that night, and her tone describing it, has struck so many viewers as fundamentally off. Some cases hand you a verdict and let you call it closed. This one handed you a verdict and left almost every emotional question wide open behind it. That gap is exactly what keeps true crime communities coming back to this story, year after year, long after the appeals process quietly runs its course. Because a courtroom can only tell you who's guilty under the law. It can't tell you who's guilty in the court of public opinion. And it definitely can't tell you what was actually going through Autumn's mind at 3:28 in the morning, in that room, in that moment. Only one person on earth knows that answer for certain, and she's the same person the internet still can't stop debating. Tyree Richardson had a family who loved him deeply, a business he was actively building, and a life ahead of him that most 20-year-olds haven't even started imagining yet. All of it ended in a doorway, in the dark, over a relationship built on more secrets than either side of it ever fully admitted to, even to themselves. If there's one thing this case should leave you with, it's this. The loudest voice in a story isn't always the most reliable one, and the calmest voice isn't always the most honest one either. If this case left you with more questions than answers, that's exactly the kind of story we cover here every single week. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and never miss a breakdown like this one again. So we'll leave it with you, the way we always do. What do you think really happened in that bedroom the night everything finally fell apart? Tell us below. We read every single one.